I'm really pleased to invite to speak our first two speakers for the first talk, the Venerable Miao Duo, who is the Deputy Abbess of the Foguanshan Europe and Abbess of London Foguanshan. So thank you very much for being here. Venerable Miao Duo, since graduating from the Guanshan Zunling Buddhist College, she has been teaching and spreading the Dharma in different parts of the world. And in 2012, Venerable Miao Duo was assigned to Europe and has been serving the community by leading Buddhist practices and studies. And she has also given numerous Dharma talks across Europe and holds regular classes teaching humanistic Buddhism and Sutra studies. Very warm welcome to you. And together with Venerable Miao Duo, we will have Roxanna Pang, who is the education coordinator at London Foguanshan Temple and lay lecturer for Buddha's Light International Association Young Adult Division. She gives regular classes on Buddhism in English and has particular interest in Buddhist education and translation. She has interpreted at many international Buddhist conferences and currently working on translation of Buddhist literature and text written by the Venerable Master Xing Yun. So please welcome our first two speakers, and we will start the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Auspicious greetings to everyone. Thank you again very much for having us here today. My name is Miao Duo. And next to me is Roxanna. We are from London Foguanshan. And without further ado, we will start and begin our presentation.
So we all know that the Lotus Sutra encompasses many key teachings which have characterized Mahayana Buddhism. The sutra is widely circulated, read and studied by many. We heard from the professor there that many people uphold, read, recite, copy the sutra, but now we're going to share with you in a more light-hearted way how we actually apply the teachings in our everyday life of such a profound sutra. Each chapter contains great wisdom of the Buddha, and if we can apply these wisdoms to our everyday life, then we can really make a difference. In fact, even from just the title, there is enough for us to discuss and learn from and apply in our everyday life. So now let's just, because of the time constraints, we're unable to actually sit here and discuss the title, which already encapsulates the Buddha's 84,000 teachings. So as we have this limited time, let's just discuss the significance of the lotus flower itself.
Yeah, the lotus flowers grows in the mud, but blossoms above the water and remains untanned. The flower is never defiled, even though it grows out of mud. Even if you pour dirty water on the lotus, the dirty water forms into beads and falls off. So this symbolizes purity and teaches us that we should not be influenced by bad friends or even a bad environment. And in today's world, we can see lots of negative things happening in society. We can choose to follow and continue these bad things, or we can opt to be like the lotus flower, maintaining our purity and not be affected by the unpleasant environment, just like children at school. So even if the whole class misbehaves, does that make it right for us to misbehave too?
So I definitely am one of those lotuses. When I was at school, I was always the good child, the good student, but practicing the Lotus Sutra there. So in order for us to remain undisturbed by the turmoils in society, it definitely requires a certain level of faith and devotion. And this is another key concept in the Lotus Sutra. Chapter 4, we talk about belief and understanding. And this belief is to have faith in the teachings and that it can lead to our emancipation. The teachings may be profound, but even those with low aptitudes are able to practice if they have faith. Without faith in the teachings, then is there even a reason to carry out the practices? Why do we even bother to practice if we don't believe in it? The faith in the wondrous Dharma should be a faith that is deeply rooted. At the end of chapter 11, the Sakyamuni Buddha asks if anyone is willing to expound the Lotus Sutra in this world after he enters parinirvana. And in chapter 13, we hear the bodhisattvas responding to say to the world-honored one not to worry, as they will uphold, read, recite, and expound the sutras after his extinction. Such great spirit and devotion must also arise from deep faith in the sutra. So I believe everyone in this room today has some sort of interest, faith, belief in the Lotus Sutra, and has probably devoted some of your time, some of your efforts to reading, studying, or even upholding the sutra. However, I'd now like to ask Venerable Miao Duo to share with us what made her have such deep faith in the Buddha's teachings and actually renounce to be able to be willing to devote her whole life to the practices and teachings of the Buddha.
Okay, actually I was born into a Buddhist family, and my mother, who is a very sincere Buddhist practitioner. So from as far as I can remember, her best friends have always been the Buddha and Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva. So every day she chants the sutras, and no matter what happens in life, whether she's happy or unhappy, she always tells Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva. So I was strongly influenced by my mother, by my mother's devotion to her practice. And naturally, I began to have a strong faith in the teachings of the Buddha that become unshakable. So later on in life, I was able to study the sutras in more depth, and I'm so fortunate to be able to renounce as a monastic in Foguangshan, which Venerable Master Xing Yun as my teacher. So as Foguangshan emphasizes on practicing the Bodhisattva way, so like quoted in the Lotus Sutra, so of course the strongest faith that we hold is faith in our ability to attain Buddhahood. So this is a teaching that runs throughout the sutra. When the Buddha attained enlightenment, he proclaimed, all sentient beings possess Buddha nature. So this is a reminder to accept and believe in oneself, as well as to have faith in one's potential to attain Buddhahood. Although we may be human beings, every person has the potential to attain Buddhahood. In other words, Buddhas are enlightened human beings. The Lotus Sutra emphasizes that Buddhahood is the ultimate goal that is achievable by all. This may sound like something that is quite far away, out of our reach, and maybe for some, mission impossible. So Rossi, would you like to share with everyone here? So how such a teachings or influence or the concept has influenced or inspired you in your life?
So I wouldn't say that I'd know that it was the teachings of the Lotus Sutra that I was actually practicing or was inspired by at the very beginning. But it was when I graduated. One thing that I remember very clearly is when I graduated and I went into my first job. Obviously, you want to make a good impression at your first job, but also it was a very difficult job. I knew that I was like a center point, and any departments that had issues, had problems, they would call me, and I'd had to guide them to find their answers or to solve the problems for them. And a lot of people warned me in advance that this wasn't going to be an easy job. So what I did do is I wanted to also make sure that I continued to practice Buddhism in my everyday life, particularly in my work as well. So as this was my first job, I actually took a little Buddha, not only to bless me, but also to remind me of the spirit of being I am a Buddha, the spirit that I have the future ability to attain Buddhahood, but also the people around me, including my colleagues, also have this ability to attain Buddhahood. So what I did was I put the little statue of the Buddha, which had the word faith underneath it, and put it right next to my telephone. And every time I answered the phone, I'd have a look at the little Buddha first and say to myself, the spirit of the Buddha is that the Buddha is compassionate, so let me be compassionate with all those people that are going to phone with all their troubles and problems and all their anger, and also let me use the wisdom of the Buddha to help them, to guide them, to solve their problems. So this was, at that time, obviously, I didn't know that this was the concept from the Lotus Sutra, actually. But I think slowly I began to make it a part of me. It wasn't something that I'd read a sutra and say this is what I was going to do, but it became something a part of me. Every time I went to answer the phone, I'd look at the little Buddha, remind myself, and even the angry people with this, the roof is leaking, the toilets are blocked, all these issues that they may have had actually didn't bother me, and I was able to keep calm and composed. And later on, I even expanded this concept of being I am a future Buddha to the person, the angry person on the other side of the phone is also a future Buddha. So if I can remember that, then I wouldn't be so annoyed with what they had to say. So even though this type of practice maybe seems quite trivial in our everyday life, but actually it really did make a big difference. And many of my colleagues actually came to ask me, how did you manage to stay in this position for such a long time? Most people that take on this job don't last very long. And I'd point to the little Buddha and say, here, it's the Buddha, it's the spirit of being, understanding that everybody has this Buddha nature and this ability to do so. And so I really could understand that if we are able to apply the teachings to our everyday life, it's not only beneficial to us, but also the people around us. And so when I eventually did leave that job, I left the little Buddha for the next person, hoping that they too can continue to understand the spirit of me, the one that answers the phone, is a future Buddha, so please behave as one. And then also with the person on the other side of the phone, if we can, they also future Buddhas, so if we could respect them the same way that we would respect a Buddha on an altar in the shrines, then actually life would be much easier for both ourselves and our colleagues. So that would be my application of the teachings in my everyday life.
Very good sharing. It reminds me that before I renounced, actually I worked for airlines, and then I work in the reservation department. So I always have to answer the phone. So, I didn't put a Buddha statue in front of me. Instead of that, I had a mirror in front of me. So whenever I'm almost, get annoyed, and then people over there is angry, then I would just look at the mirror, and then I would have a big smile. And I say that, well, he must be very angry now, so I won't be able to be angry like him. So then after seeing that, I can answer the phone very calmly. I think it's very similar. Great.
I think it's actually, in fact, it's the same. Whether it's the Buddha statue or it's the image of ourselves, because we are future Buddhas, it's probably the same concept. So any tips for anybody here that works in a reception, needs to answer the phone, either put a little statue of the Buddha or a mirror. I'm sure it'll be able to help you and remind you of the profound teachings of the Lotus Sutra.
Right. Okay.
And so this actually leads us on very nicely to the next key concept that we talk about, is actually from the Satapariputra Bodhisattva, the Bodhisattva that never disparages. And whoever he meets, he always bows to them and he says, I dare not belittle you because you will all become Buddhas. So even though I did practice that over the phone, I didn't know that this was actually the practice of this Bodhisattva. This Bodhisattva deeply respects everybody, and he had never had any hints of arrogance or discrimination. Hence, that's why he was called the Bodhisattva that never disparages. I think this is something that we can also learn to practice in everyday life. Can anyone here dare to say that they've never disparaged, belittled, got annoyed with anybody in their everyday life?
Right. Out of an understanding of the Buddha, and that Buddhism is about equality, I encourage everyone to recognize that they are Buddhas. there have been Buddhas of the past, there are Buddhas of the present, and there will be Buddhas of the future. So he never get angry when people hurt or insulted him. So even if we are unable to practice any of the other profound teachings of the Lotus Sutra, if we are able just to bear this in mind, then I'm sure that it will not only make a positive impact to our lives, to those around us, and also to society. Upon attaining enlightenment beneath the Bodhi tree, the Buddha said, all beings possess the same wisdom and virtues of the Tathagata. This was a declaration of universal equality between the mind, the Buddha, and all beings. Not only does Buddhism promote equality among all people, but also between men and women, sentient beings and Buddhas, the ordinary and sagely, etc.
So we can see that equality is something we talk about a lot in everyday life now, but actually equality was spoken of by the Buddha at that time already. But are we actually really able to practice it like this bodhisattva that never disparages? I remember the first time I read the Lotus Sutra, I thought it was actually quite amazing, and particularly this chapter. And so I was inspired by this bodhisattva, and I set myself a task to be mindful of all the people that I come across on that day and see if I was able to really practice like the bodhisattva. And so I tell you the truth, it wasn't easy. As I think often we are so engrossed in our own everyday life and what we want to do. So that day, I'd set it in my mind that tomorrow that was what I was going to do. From the moment I woke up, I got ready, I left my house, walked from my house to the train station. Once I got to this train station, I realized that I'd already walked past probably 20, 30 people and not paid any attention to them because I was listening to the music in my earphones and walking like I normally do. And it was probably a missed opportunity to show my respect to all those people that we kind of just ignore, but we actually walk past. And then I got on the tube, and there was the next big challenge for me. When it's a hot summer's day and you're on the tube, squashed between people, and it's stuffy and it smells a bit in there. And then to really see all the people around me as future Buddhas and have the same respect as the bodhisattva that never disparages. Definitely a very difficult task, and definitely one that I failed at doing. And then once I got into the office, I said, I need to start again. I failed going to the train station. I failed on the train. So let me try and really bring my mind and my focus back to trying to practice just this one chapter of the 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra. Is it possible for me to even do this one? So then working-wise, it was not too bad. And then on my lunch break, as I went out to get my lunch, I queued up in the cafe with lots of people in front of me. And then suddenly I reminded myself, and I remembered, even though I have a very limited lunch break and I'm trying to get my lunch, get back to my desk, everything, and I was probably starting to get a bit annoyed, but I looked at the long queue in front of me and I realized all these people are in the same situation as me. They're all also trying to get their lunch and go back to their office. And so we realized that actually everybody is equal and we're so interconnected, and that if we see people in this way, then actually we shouldn't belittle anyone. And even the person behind the till who's trying to serve all of these 100 people that are actually in a rush to get their lunch and go home, even if they are a little bit annoyed, I actually felt that from this practice, I was able to really reflect upon my little actions and the thoughts that were arising in my mind, and therefore able to treat everybody around me with a little bit more respect and a little bit more understanding. And so my journey on the tube home was a lot better, even though I can't say that I did to the level of the bodhisattva, but I'm sure it was a lot better. It wasn't so frustrated. And then when I got home, normally when you get home from a tired day of work, it's your family that gets the worst of it because you're annoyed. But actually, that day, my family realized that I'd come back in a much better mood. And also I realized that just by remembering these few words of the bodhisattva, not only does it have a great impact on ourselves, but also on the people around us, and even the people that we don't know when we're walking down the streets. If we have that little bit of respect for everyone, then people actually feel it. So I would say that sometimes in our everyday life, it's not easy, but if we could, And now that I've refreshed my memory whilst preparing for this presentation today, maybe I'll try to make it part of my homework to try to do maybe at least once a week, and then maybe increase that a little bit more. But maybe it's something that we could all try, just to practice the spirit of the never disparaging bodhisattva. And we will realize actually how careless sometimes we are in treating people.
Mm-hmm. So never disparaging bodhisattva presents a great role model for all on how we can respect the lives and dignity of others, regardless of gender, race, cultural background, class, or occupation. All possess the inner head Buddha nature, which makes everyone equal in their potential for enlightenment. The Buddha explained this perfectly using the parable of medicinal herbs. So in this parable, a cloud spread over the world and rains down equally upon all the grasses, trees, flowers, and medicinal herbs. Through all these plants and trees grow in the same earth and are moistured by the same rain, each has its differences and particulars. The Buddha is like the cloud. Although he equally expounded the Dharma to all beings, they all understand the Buddha's teachings in a different manner depending on their own individual abilities and characters. Once again, here we are reminded to practice equally and acceptance of each individual and their characteristics and aptitude.
So in the London Fo Guangshan Temple, we actually have a Buddhist Sunday school for the children, and our children age range from about 2+ to teenagers about 16 years old. So imagine these 2-year-olds and 16-year-olds in the same classroom. It's like these different herbs and plants and trees, and the teacher has to prepare the same class, and hopefully each one of them will take in what they can. And I remember one day I was teaching the class on compassion, and there was this 3-year-old boy just walking around the class, looked like he wasn't paying any attention to what I was saying, and even to the point where I thought, why are you even here? And anyway, we continued to discuss the topic of compassion, and it was only 2 days later when his mother phoned me and said she was at home getting quite annoyed one day, and all of a sudden her son turned up and said to her, "Mum, you need to practice compassion." And she asked him, "What is compassion?" And he said, "Be kind to others." So it's only when she told me that I realized, yes, I had also belittled that. Maybe we considered it as a blade of grass. But actually at that time when this Dharma rain was falling down, he also absorbed what he needed and also used it at the most relevant time to give his mum the right teaching. So this is a very strong example that actually is very memorable to me.
Yes, we can see that a simple parable has a very profound meaning. It teaches respect for diversity. It teaches the Buddha's compassion to recognize and treasure the uniqueness in each individual and to treat all equally without no discrimination. It encourages us to create harmony and unity amongst all people, regardless of background. So Venerable Master Xing Yun initiated the when Buddha Meets the Gods event in 2011 to establish a good platform for dialogue and exchange between different faiths. Every year on 25th December, thousands of representatives and statues of gods from different places gather together at Fo Guangshan Buddha Memorial Center with the support of their devotees, which is truly a marvelous interfaith unity and harmony. The event is not only attended by the various religions in Taiwan, we have also invited religious leaders from all over the world to join us, such as imams from UK and Catholic priests from France, etc. People from different walks of life come together to pray for peace. At the same time, we were paying our respects to the gods from all over. Venerable Master has always advocated that all religions should embrace each other's differences rather than seeking similarities. Such events bring people together, demonstrating respect and devotion to faith, tolerance, and respect for different religious beliefs and diversity.
So Fo Guangshan often organizes events such as when Buddha meets the gods, and also many other events that we sometimes may not think have a direct link to Buddhism. After reading the Lotus Sutra, I can surely say that all of these are in fact forms of expedient means. Expedient means are the use of different methods that are suitable for the people so that they are able to accept and understand those teachings. In the earlier passages, the Buddha teaches us that he taught the assembly that his earlier teachings were only provisional, and people were not ready for his highest teachings and had to be brought to enlightenment by expedient means. But the Lotus Sutra represents the final highest teachings and supersedes all the other teachings previously. So how do we actually practice expedient means in our everyday life?
It is, in fact, to give people what they need at the right time in the right place. Expedient means is a practice of giving others convenience. It is indeed a kind of skillful wisdom. Expedient means are also about being agile and flexible. I think it is fair to say that humanistic Buddhism, as propagated by Fo Guangshan, is the perfect definition of expedient means. Expedient means can come in many forms too. Just a change of language is a form of expedient means. In the past, we often taught about the purification of the 3 karmas, purifying one's body, mind, and speech. Such language may be too difficult for young children to understand, and it is not easy to understand how to actually put into practice. So that is why Venerable Master Xing Yun introduced the 3 acts of goodness: do good deeds, speak good words, and think good thoughts, campaign in 1998. Through direct, straightforward language, it is clear and easily understandable. The 3 acts of goodness may seem simple, but contain the profound dharma that holds true to the Buddha's original intents.
So I understand that we are actually running out of time, but we do want to share a little bit more on one of the very important chapters, which is chapter 25 of the Lotus Sutra. This is something that we can't miss out on, the Universal Gate chapter. And let's skip that one. Okay. So we understand that the Universal Gate chapter refers to the Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva's ability to universally respond to all living beings without exception. The Bodhisattva really does have a lot of characteristics for us to emulate, but one that resonates a lot with me is actually often quoted and is her vow to liberate all sentient beings and respond to all that calls out her name. And surely this seems something that's very difficult for us to achieve in our everyday life. We find it difficult to just sort out our own problems, let alone respond to the calls of others. But actually, it may not be as hard as it seems. If we are able to practice the loving kindness and compassion, we realize that this is not only a characteristic of the Guanyin Bodhisattva. Loving kindness means to bring happiness to others, and compassion means to alleviate their suffering. Instead of reserving our love and compassion for those that we know, we need to have the unconditional loving kindness for all sentient beings. And then even in the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha actually predicted Buddhahood for Devadatta, his, somebody that actually harmed him so often. So if we're able to practice this loving kindness, not just to the people that we know, but to even those that have harmed us, that would be true practice of the bodhisattva.
So we're running out of time, and once again, thank you very much for inviting us here. The very last part, I would like to say that in chapter 18, the Buddha revealed that the merits of a person who rejoiced at hearing the teachings of the Lotus Sutra are unlimited. Hence, everyone here today has accumulated boundless merits. In fact, if you listen to these teachings and expound them to others, then you are also teachers of the Dharma. So may we all have faith in the teachings of the wondrous Dharma and in ourselves to uphold and spread them. May we dedicate these merits to all beings.
This concludes our sharings today. There are so many teachings in the Lotus Sutra, and I think every sentence of the sutra is already worth a talk by within itself. If we are able to actually apply these, even just one sentence, it will actually benefit us in everyday life. I guess the shared presentation between the Venerable and myself is a great example of the practice of equality in the Lotus Sutra, where the Sangha and the lay people are given equal opportunities. And this also tells us that the teachings of the Lotus Sutra are not only for monastics, but for lay people like you and me. So we hopefully that we can all apply these teachings in our everyday life and have faith within ourselves, faith within our potential to become Buddhas, so that we can perceive ourselves and others as future Buddhas. Remember, the ultimate goal of Buddhahood is actually achieved by every one of us here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Venerable Miao Duo and Roxanna Pang. It has been a fantastic, really inspiring talk, and also seamless continuation from the keynote earlier. I thought it was really nice going through how the text is used and then really looking at the significance, value, and how this text can be practiced in everyday life, especially now, as you said, at these times of conflict, great anxiety and uncertainty. It's so important to be able to practice the key values of Buddhism as told and taught by the Lotus Sutra text. So thank you so much. And we are now taking a 15 minutes break until I think 4:30, 4:35, and we will convene back here for panel 1 for the other 2 talks, and then we will have questions at the end. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.